pelvis closed on the day someone crossed your sacred boundary. That closing didn't happen yesterday, nor last week, but in a much earlier moment of your life, when you were too young to name what was happening, and the only possible move was to contract the base, harden the sacrum, and raise an inner defense that was never undone. Since then, something in the depths of your body has remained on constant alert, shaping how you inhabit intimacy, how you respond to moments of vulnerability, and how you react to any situation that asks for your full presence. This pattern is not weakness, nor ordinary tension that disappears with stretching or massage. It is a somatic defense inscribed in the tissue, installed when the nervous system did not yet know how to create conscious boundaries and had to protect the center in the only way it knew. What you now feel as persistent rigidity at the base, difficulty fully relaxing, or sudden withdrawal in moments of surrender is the echo of that original contraction the body preserved for decades, waiting for a safety signal that never came. Today you're going to learn how to identify the exact point where that defense was installed. Apply a minimal gesture that shifts the sacrum from its locked position, and use a specific breath that updates the nervous system's reading of danger. If you leave this video now, you'll miss the moment when that contraction will begin to soften and the base will regain the capacity to sustain the present without reacting to the past. What shaped your pelvis that day is about to be revealed. This closing of the pelvis functions like a defensive file installed in the body. There is a specific somatic pattern where the base contracted in a fraction of a second and never fully released again, creating a protection signature that remained active decades after the event that triggered it. The sacrum lost its natural curve, the sacroiliac joints locked in a posterior position, and the pelvic diaphragm hardened like a board that blocks any movement of opening or surrender. Hermetic traditions recognized the pelvis as the first seal of the inner temple, the sacred territory where life energy anchors before ascending through the spine. When this territory is crossed before a person has the maturity to establish conscious boundaries, the seal becomes a lock. What should be a living foundation, able to sustain presence and movement, turns into an immobile fortress that defends something that no longer needs to be defended. Polyvagal theory explains what happens in this moment of locking. When a threat is perceived as inescapable during a phase of immature neurological development, the nervous system activates the dorsal vagal state, paralyzing the center of the body as a last survival strategy. This paralysis does not simply disappear because the event is over. It installs itself as a neural signature recorded in the deep musculature of the pelvic floor, in the fascia surrounding the sacrum, and in the way the body interprets safety. Recent neuroimaging studies reveal that intense experiences lived at early ages permanently altered the connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic structures of the brain. This alteration drastically reduces the nervous system's ability to distinguish past threat from present reality. The body keeps operating as if the danger never ended, maintaining the base in a state of perpetual defense, even when objective life presents no real threat. This rigidity at the base is not just an uncomfortable physical sensation. It shapes decisions you postpone, relationships you interrupt before they deepen, opportunities you refuse because something in the depths of the body triggers an automatic withdrawal. The contraction installed that day governs how you inhabit intimacy, how you hold commitments, and how you respond to any invitation that demands vulnerable presence. There is someone who lived exactly this for more than 3 decades, and that person's story will illuminate how this pattern operates until the moment the inner territory is finally reclaimed. Barbara was 50 years old and had managed a department store for more than a decade. Her routine demanded constant presence, quick decisions, and difficult conversations that she handled with apparent competence. But there was something no one around her could perceive from a very young age. From a time when she still didn't know how to set boundaries or name what was happening, her base had closed completely. What began as an automatic protective response in a moment when someone crossed her sacred boundary became a permanent defense that governed her entire life. The rigidity was visceral and inescapable. Barbara couldn't relax her pelvis, not when she was alone, not when she was safe. The sacrum remained contracted, as if the body was still defending what had happened decades earlier, when she was too young to process or interrupt what was being done to her. Her breath would not descend to the base. Her lower back lived in chronic tension, and any situation that demanded surrender or vulnerability triggered an automatic withdrawal in the depths of the body. It was as if the pelvis had frozen on that day and had never regained the ability to let go. She had tried conventional therapy, physical therapy for her lower back, meditation, yoga, and even deep body work. Nothing worked because none of these approaches reached the defensive file installed in the sacrum when she was only a few years old. The tension always returned because the body kept protecting the territory that had been invaded at a time when she had no way to defend herself. The closing of the base was not an isolated physical symptom. It was the somatic record of something that had never been processed or released. It was during a workshop on somatic trauma and pelvic release that Barbara heard for the first time how experiences of invasion in youth create permanent defensive contractions at the center of the body. The therapist explained that when the sacred boundary is crossed before neurological maturation, the nervous system archives the impact directly in the pelvic musculature, locking the sacrum as the only way to prevent something similar from reaching that depth again. Barbara felt her whole body recognize that description, as if someone had finally named what she had kept locked in her base for more than 40 years. The first time she applied the minimal gesture of sacral reorganization, a delicate micro-tilt. Taught by the therapist, Barbara noticed something she hadn't felt since before that day. The depths of the pelvis began to give way. It wasn't complete relief, nor instant release, but an unmistakable sense that the defensive file was beginning to dismantle, as if the body had finally received permission to let go of what it had held for entire decades. What Barbara discovered in that moment is exactly what you are going to experience in your own body now. The first step is to locate the exact point where the closing lives. This is not about mental analysis or trying to remember when it started, but about refined tactile perception that allows the body to reveal where the defense was installed. Sit in a chair or on the floor with your back supported. Place both hands at the base of your sacrum, just above the coccyx, and begin to feel the difference between simply being on top of the pelvis, dissociated from it, and truly being seated in it, present in the territory that has been closed for so long. Direct all your attention to where your body weight concentrates. Notice whether there is a specific region that feels harder than the rest, a point where the sensation is of a block instead of living bone. or an area that simply doesn't respond when you try to feel what is there. This lack of response is not absence of sensation, it is the presence of defense. It is the defensive file operating, keeping that territory inaccessible because that is where the invasion happened and the body decided it would never again allow full access to that depth. You may notice a lack of temperature in this region, as if the sacrum were colder than the rest of the spine. You may notice that the breath does not reach this area, that the inner movement simply doesn't arrive there. Or you may feel a subtle resistance, as if there were an invisible layer preventing your attention from fully penetrating. Any of these signs indicates that you have located the point where the ancient contraction was preserved. Don't force anything. Simply recognize that you are facing the territory that was locked when you were too young to stop what was happening. The second step is to reorganize the sacrum without triggering the defensive alarm that has kept this region locked for decades. The movement is a micro-tilt, so subtle it is almost invisible externally, but powerful enough to shift the bone from the position in which it remained frozen. Keep your hands at the base of the sacrum and very gently tilt the pelvis backward as if you wanted to slightly round the lower back, then return to neutral. The movement should be microscopic, just enough for you to feel the sacrum sliding minimally within the pelvis. Do not force range. If the base is extremely contracted, the movement may be almost imperceptible at first, just an intention to tilt that the body can barely carry out. This is expected. The deep musculature of the pelvic floor has spent decades in chronic spasm, and it needs a delicate invitation, not an invasion. Repeat the gesture 5 or 6 times, always with the same gentleness, allowing the sacroiliac joints to begin adjusting without triggering the protective reflex that closes everything again when it detects threat. If you already perceive some mobility at the base, you can explore the sacral sliding a bit more, allowing the bone to move with greater range within the pelvis. But if the contraction is still intense, keep the movement minimal. What matters is not how much you move, but the quality of attention you direct to that territory while you perform the gesture. It is this present attention, combined with the precise movement, that begins to inform the nervous system that the defensive file can begin to be dismantled, because the body now has choice where before there was only automatic reaction. Before moving on to the third step, you need to know what happened with Barbara in the first weeks that she applied exactly these 2 steps you have just completed. In the first sessions, applying the location of the defensive point and the sacral microtilt, Barbara noticed something she hadn't felt since before that day in her youth. For the first time in more than 40 years, she was able to sit in a chair without her lower back contracting reflexively. Her breath began to descend to the base, reaching a region that had remained blocked since her sacred boundary was crossed. Warmth returned to the sacrum, and the chronic sense that the depths of the body were cold stone began to yield, revealing that there was living tissue beneath the defense she had carried for decades. The changes were not only physical. Barbara was able to hold a difficult conversation with an employee without feeling the automatic withdrawal in the center of the body that made her avoid confrontations. She accepted an invitation to a relationship that, months earlier, she would have rejected with the excuse of not being ready, when in fact it was the body that refused any situation of vulnerability. She noticed that moments of intimacy no longer triggered the reflex closing of the pelvis, as if the nervous system had finally begun to distinguish present from past. The base was no longer operating as perpetual defense. It was beginning to function as real support. What Barbara felt in those early applications is exactly what is beginning to manifest in your body now. The location of the defensive point and the reorganization of the sacrum have initiated the updating process. But the third step is still needed to consolidate this transformation and inform the nervous system, unequivocally, that the inner territory has been reclaimed and that the danger that once demanded closing is no longer present. The third step is oriented breathing that updates the nervous system's reading of safety. Up to now, you have located the defense and reorganized the geometry of the sacrum, but the body may still be operating with the old record of threat active. The directed breath works as a final command that informs the deep neural structures that the defensive file can be deactivated because the present moment is not repeating what happened decades ago. Keep one hand at the base of the sacrum and begin to breathe in a way that the exhalation is longer than the inhalation. Inhale naturally through the nose without forcing, and then exhale slowly through the mouth, directing all your attention to the pelvic region. Feel the air descending along the spine, passing through the diaphragm and arriving at the base, reaching the territory that the ancient contraction was blocking. The prolonged exhalation activates the vagus nerve and signals to the autonomic nervous system that there is no imminent danger, that it is safe to switch off the state of perpetual alert. Repeat this breath 10 times, always keeping your hand on the sacrum and feeling how the region begins to respond differently with each breathing cycle. The 3 steps form a complete reopening code. The first located where the defense was installed, allowing you to recognize the exact point that was locked when the sacred boundary was crossed. The second reorganized the geometry of the sacrum, shifting the bone from its frozen position and allowing the deep musculature to begin releasing layers of tension preserved for decades. The third updated the neural reading of safety, informing the body that the inner territory has been reclaimed and that the pelvis no longer needs to react to the past as if it were still happening. The central ritual is complete. What you have just carried out is the same process that allowed Barbara to reclaim her base after more than 40 years operating in perpetual defense. Now comes the moment to seal this experience in your body so that the transformation consolidates, and you have a portable tool you can use whenever you feel the old contraction trying to return. The physical marker that proves the reorganization is tangible and verifiable. The breath now descends to the base without obstruction, reaching the territory that had been blocked for decades. Warmth has returned to the sacrum, replacing the sensation of cold stone you carried in that region. You can sit without your lower back contracting reflexively, and the depths of the body are finally available for rest instead of remaining in constant alert. These signs are not abstract. They are concrete evidence that the defensive file has begun to be dismantled and that the pelvis is starting to recognize the present instead of reacting to the past. To anchor this new state, use a simple and discreet signal gesture that can be repeated in any context. Place one hand at the base of the sacrum with light pressure and take a long exhalation directed to that region. Maintain this contact for 30 to 60 seconds, feeling how the warmth of the hand and the quality of the breath consolidate the reorganization that has just occurred. This gesture works as a somatic seal, that the body recognizes as confirmation that the inner territory has been reclaimed. When you feel the base beginning to contract again in the coming day's rigidity, returning to the sacrum, breath shortening, sudden withdrawal in the face of a situation that asks for openness or vulnerability, place your hand on the base of the sacrum. Perform a delicate micro-tilt and breathe 3 times, directing the exhalation to this territory. While you do this, remind yourself inwardly that your body can now sustain presence without defending, that the pelvis no longer needs to close as it did when you were too young to stop what was happening. This sequence turns what you learned today into a portable tool that reorganizes the base whenever the old defense tries to return. The seal is complete. The reorganization of the inner territory you have just performed is not merely temporary relief. It is an updating of somatic code that allows a completely different way of inhabiting the base. What was locked on that day has begun to dismantle, and the coming days will reveal how this unfolds in your capacity to sustain presence. Relationships and commitments that previously triggered automatic closing. You now carry in your body the experience of a base that does not react to the past, but recognizes the present. This is not just a change in physical posture or temporary relief from tension. It is an update of somatic code that changes how you inhabit relationships, how you hold difficult decisions, and how you respond to commitments that previously triggered automatic withdrawal. The pelvis that closed that day to protect you has begun to regain the capacity to sustain presence without contracting, to inhabit vulnerability without triggering the alarm that was active for entire decades. The ritual you applied today is one of the gateways to deep somatic reorganization, but it is not the only one. There are other territories in the body where old defenses have also been installed, and await a similar update. Points in the throat that blocked expression, tensions in the diaphragm that limited breathing, contractions in the solar plexus that reduced the capacity to feel. Each of these files preserved a protection that made sense in the past and now needs to be dismantled so that the entire body can regain amplitude, warmth, and the capacity to inhabit the present without carrying the weight of threats that have already ceased. Peter Levine, creator of somatic experiencing, understood something fundamental about how the body preserves what the mind forgets. He showed that somatic release is not abstract overcoming nor purely psychological work, but concrete updating of files inscribed in the tissue. What you did today was not to talk about the trauma. It was to dismantle the neural signature it left recorded in the deep musculature of the base, allowing the nervous system to finally receive the safety signal that never arrived, back when you were too young to protect yourself. Ancient traditions understood the body as a temple, not as a poetic metaphor, but because they recognized that reorganizing inner territory is restoring a sacred foundation where presence can finally dwell. When the pelvis ceases to operate as a fortress and returns to functioning as a living base, what is reorganized is not just a set of muscles and bones, but the very foundation upon which consciousness, creativity, and capacity for surrender rest. What was crossed that day is being returned to its original function, and this opens possibilities that had been blocked for so long that you may have forgotten they existed. If this video resonated with you, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. Share it with those you know have also had their sacred boundary crossed and still feel their pelvis closed. Consider consider becoming a member of the channel to support the production of more content with this depth. Write in the comments, "The old contraction has eased and my pelvis now recognizes only the present." This anchors the ritual in your body and creates a testimony of transformation for others who still carry this contraction. To continue this journey of somatic reorganization, click on the video that is appearing on the screen and watch one more transformative video from the channel. The base that closed to protect you on that day when someone crossed your sacred boundary is now beginning to recognize that you no longer need to live locked by something that has already passed. The body finally has permission to release what it preserved for decades, and the pelvis can cease to be a defense file and become the territory where you finally inhabit yourself fully.